education into all of this. So if you want to cut to the meat of the matter, these people will understand. You don't have to build up to it.
Right. Well, I mean, I talk to audiences so often, and I'm aware that when I'm talking to an audience, that people generally have not been initiated into this kind of thinking, and so that's why I try and lay a foundation for. There are a lot of occult symbols and emblems in government and religion, and I wanted to get into one in particular. The Nazis, the communists, the fascists, and all of the ancient world powers that have ever existed have used one common symbol continually, and that's the sun. Now, if you understand that the earliest history, the prehistory of the human race goes back into the most ancient times, and God knows how far back that would be, 10, 20,000, maybe 50,000 years, I don't know. But if you go back to the earliest times of the human race, you can appreciate that the world was a very different place than what we live in today, okay? And so if you understand that it was a very cold and very fearful world at night, okay? And if you understand also that in that cold and fearful world, when the sun went down, there was a lot of fear for your life. There were a lot of predatory animals. And so the coming of the sun the next morning was always something to look forward to, that brought warmth, that brought light, and brought security. And around that concept grew a whole religio-political philosophy of the coming of the sun, God's sun, the light of the world. And it has been used by the ancient Egyptians, all the mystery schools, and of course you probably know it was referred to as Baal worship at one time. Baal was the sun, God's sun, the light of the world. And, the whole concept in the ancient world was that he had 12 helpers, which were the 12 signs of the zodiac, or the 12 months of the year. And of course, and he died, of course, with the crown of thorns, like the Statue of Liberty has the crown of thorns. It's the corona of the sun rays. And when we begin to see all of these connections, and of course, in the spring of the year, the sun, which had died in winter, had passed over from the death of winter into the new life of spring. So in the old Semitic world, they celebrated the Passover. And we even say that today when someone dies, they passed on, or they passed away, or they passed over. Yeah. And so we get the old symbolism out of Egypt of the sun dying in the winter and passing over to the new life in spring. And so in the beginning of spring, we had the Passover. It's an interesting thing, too, about the sun, is that the ancient world realized that on the December 22nd, which was the winter solstice, they noticed something interesting on the sundials. And of course, the sundials being round, they could each degree for each day. They noticed that on the 22nd, the sun did not move. On the 22nd, it stayed on the sundial on the same degree. On the 23rd, it stayed on the same degree. It didn't move any further south, and it didn't start back north. On the 24th, it was still in the same degree on the sundial. It didn't move. So they said, the ancient Egyptians said, anything that was moving and is now not moving is dead. So therefore they said God's son died and was in his tomb or dead for 3 days. Then on December 25th, anything that was dead and in his grave and not moving for 3 days and now begins to move back to the northern hemisphere, it moved its first degree. So on December 25th, they said God's son is born on December 25th.
Now, in the real world, let's clarify something for a lot of people who are listening out there. You're not talking anything about Christmas. You're not talking about what Christians traditionally recognize as,
I'm getting
as
into
the birth of Christ. You're getting into
symbolism
of the ancient religion of the sun,
right,
which was later perverted in Christianity to reflect this in order to capture the pagan worshipers into the Christian church.
Absolutely, right. Now, what I'm saying is that
December the 25th is not Christ's birthday.
No, not at all. No, it's the birthday of the sun.
Right.
And then, but then when you understand that this symbolism began to be, the ancient peoples understood that the sun was revolved, and it was a symbol of revolution. And today in America we have, or at least in the western part of the United States, we have an oil company called Union Oil. Union Oil has as a symbol a round orange globe with the 76, and of course the commercial says, get the spirit of 76. The orange globe is a sun, because the communists have always used the rising sun if you recall, on the Soviet national coat of arms, is the rising sun that's bringing the dawn of a new day.
And the symbology of 76 plugs into what's called
76, and the 13, 76 is 13.
Right, and the order of the trapezoid. And if you figure out the formula of the ancient religion, which says, as above, so below, the creation of this country in 1776 was guaranteed to bring into the world the new man, the illumined man, 3 degrees of 6x or 666.
Right. And 8 is the number in the old Kabbalistic Freemasonry in Europe. 8 was the number of new beginnings. And the new beginnings, was 17 is 7 and 1, 8. And 13 was, of course, the old mystic number of God and his 12 helpers of God and his 12 months make 13. And so...
it's also the number of death and rebirth, or resurrection, or reincarnation, depending upon how you look at that. But
so once you get into all of the symbolism, you see that there is a rhyme and a reason to all of these emblems and symbols. And something else in relation to word symbols, and God knows we're inundated by innuendos and catchphrases in this country especially. We've been hearing since George Bush made it publicly known something called the New World Order. I want to clarify something for your audience. They probably might already know this, but Europe has been referred to as the Old World, and anything coming out of Europe is Old World. All right. The Vatican has dominated Europe for about 1,500, 1,600 years. The Vatican has dominated Europe. Europe has dominated the world. There was a religio-political economic scheme of things. That was the order of the day. The old banking houses of the Roman Empire, the old, what was some of the families? Arius, Copernicus, Pisos. The Pisos family were a very powerful banking family who were the main brains behind. They were the Rockefellers of the Roman Empire.
The Medicis.
The Medicis, absolutely. And so when you understand that there was a banking, fraternal, religio-political order that operated throughout the world, and the Vatican sat on top of that, and that was an old world order. Now, with the coming of America, of course, America is referred to as the New World, and so what we have now is a New World Order. And that New World Order implies that there is a fraternal order operating throughout the world, operating out of America, that seeks to, it seeks to take the place of the old world order and bring a new order of the world. But you must understand that you cannot have a new order or a new building on the same site as an old building. So you've got to get rid of the old order first and bring in the new order. When you get into that, and I'm sorry, I've got a frog in my throat.
That's okay.
When you get into that, you get into the symbolism Steven Spielberg and George Lucas bring out about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And, of course, you can't understand the Last Crusade if you don't understand the First Crusade, right?
Or the next crusade.
Or the next crusade, which is the real crusade, right? And then from there, you get the trilogy of Star Wars, and then the Empire Strikes Back. And, of course, New York is referred to as the Empire State.
That's correct.
All right, and so you get the Empire Strikes Back, and then, of course, you might know this, that in Freemasonry, there is a little ideologue or a little genie-like mystical character, supposedly in Freemasonry, that they said was their mediator between the gods and the Freemasons of the Knights Templars. And that little saint, or that little, what would I say, mediator, in the old Knights Templar tradition was a little short, monster with pointed ears, and his name was Yoda. And you go into the old Masonic literature and pictures, and you'll see pictures of Yoda, because he was a Jedi Knight. And if you understand the Jedi Knights, where it was connected to the old order of the knighthood of the Knights Templars. So what we're talking about here is the Star Wars. We're talking about a spiritual war in the heavens, so to speak.
Well, this was a cosmology, a celestial religion, so to speak.
Absolutely.
They talk about moving on to the celestial sphere,
right?
When they discuss passing.
That right, and then of course the sun was. Well, the ancient Egyptians said that the sun walked across the sky, so therefore we have Luke Skywalker. And then you have
this comes 1,000 points of light.
That's 1,000 points of light, and a 1,000-year reign of the Nazi Empire, or whatever. And what we're talking about here is secret societies and their use of symbols and emblems in religion, in politics, and philosophy. And incidentally, when you graduate from university, I meant to bring this out. When you graduate from university, you wear a long black robe. The black robe is, of course, the same black robe that the priest wears.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same black robe that the judge wears. All right, because the black robe symbolized it goes back to the old Saturnalian cult, which was pre-Egyptian, the worship of Saturn. And according to that ancient Semitic cult, when you got married, you wear the ring. The ring was the ring of Saturn. The women would show their submission to that god by wearing the earring. That's where we get the idea of the king being crowned. He wears a round crown or the round circle of the god of Saturn. Saturn, as I said, was assigned the color black, and therefore the black robe is the worship of Saturn, the Saturnalian god. What was I going to say about? Oh yes, and when you graduate with the square mortarboard. The square mortarboard is always the symbol of the brick masons use the mortarboard. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, when you graduate, you are referred to as an alumni, which comes from the word illumini. You have been illuminated, which basically means you now know what to kiss and when, and how to think and what to think and how to act. And you have been properly educated.
You belong to the priesthood.
That's right. You belong to the priesthood. And if you go along to get along, and don't cause any problems, then you
go along to get along. You might get a little, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Nobody else gets anything.
And my point is, and I have said this to so many audiences, that there is this country, the United States, has no real enemies in the world. After the Second World War, especially, is that true?
Well, every enemy, even before the Second World War, the enemies that we've had have been creation.
That's right. We created them. Absolutely. Right. But there is one legitimate, believable enemy that faces America, that the powers behind the throne in this country, in America, are truly afraid of. And this is legitimate. They are totally frightened to death of us, the people, because they realize if the people ever wake up, something that Joe Kennedy was quoted as saying, something to the effect of beware the American conscience, because if they ever wake up and find out what we're doing, it's going to be hell to play. And so I believe that there is a legitimate enemy that this country perceives, and that's us. People who think too much, people who read too much, and people who talk too much.
But that's always the case, though, Jordan, because we know that what's coming is going to be a socialist state.
Oh, totally.
Every time socialism has won anywhere, the first thing that they've done is that they have literally perverted the intelligentsia, which has brought them to power. And then the first thing that they did is kill the intelligentsia. They killed them.
Absolutely.
And the intelligentsia aren't very intelligent because they haven't learned this yet, because they're still doing it. But
the more we change, the more we stay the same.
That's right. We'll come back to that in just a few minutes.